وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى يوم الدين. The previous nights, when we mentioned in Islamic law, or a few Islamic laws, we talked about fidya, which is a compensation for those that can't fast. We talked about the kafara, or penalty, for those that basically broke their fast. They had the conditions to fast and they broke their fast. Tonight I want to give another kafara, or penalty, and that is the penalty of, they call it ta'khir, or delay. What is the kafara if somebody delays their fast? First of all, what does it mean? It means this. If somebody has an excuse in the month of Ramadan, they're excused to fast, and they don't fast, they have 1 year from this month of Ramadan until the next to make it up. If they don't make it up, there's a kafara, or a penalty, for delaying your qada, or delaying your made up fast. Even though traveling, or somebody that is escaping the month of Ramadan, is not recommended, right? But it's not haram. Somebody can travel in the month of Ramadan, and then they say, I want to make up my fast later on. Well, they have to make up that fast in 1 year, before the next month of Ramadan. If they don't, they have to pay 1 mud ta'am, which is equal to about 1.7 pounds, 750 grams of food items to the poor. One of the institutions that takes care of this, they said it's about $5 per day. So say if they miss 10 days, they're traveling and they couldn't make it up until the next month of Ramadan. They didn't make it up on purpose. They didn't make it up on purpose. They have to pay $50 to this institute that would, or themselves, that have to give these food items, not the money. They have to give these food items to these different people. So that we can learn our ahkam and practice it, please give a salawat. The topic that we were talking about is ubudiyat, which is being a true slave of God. And even though we don't like this term, slave, even in different languages, when you say it and you say it about yourself, you don't like it. But this is one of the greatest honors that Allah has given us, and one of the greatest things to do is to submit to God. And we have to submit, we said, either we like it or not, the entire universe is submitting to Allah. We might have a little bit free will in this world. We can show a little bit rebellion, but in the hereafter it'll be much different. We cannot speak unless with the permission of God. We talked about if a person wants to develop this trait slowly, the 70 or 80 years that God has given us life, that every year and every month of Ramadan he makes himself a better servant and better slave of God. He has to, or she has to be aware of the dangers and the opposite of being a slave. They have to also be aware of the opposite side of faith, which is shirk. And we said that the Bani Umayyah, they would allow people to talk about Iman, but they wouldn't allow them to talk about shirk and polytheism. So we have to familiarize ourselves with the dangers, the dark side, the evil side, the side of Satan, the side of Iblis, of polytheism. And at the core of this side, the evil side, and if we don't understand it, and we don't understand societies that are immersed themselves in this evil side, we won't be able to guard our Iman. We won't be able to develop Iman. And I mentioned this, and I'll say it again tonight. It's like when we say, La ilaha illallah. You reject a false lifestyle first. You reject a false belief first, then you accept the pure belief. And this is what Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam did. And this is why his stage of Iman was one of the highest. The Quran says, وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. He wasn't of the polytheists, over and over, because he rejected and he separated himself from the evil. Another point, and we talked about istikbar, somebody that is very arrogant and they reject Allah. All of this comes from this concept or this source. And it is the most dangerous source of evil inside all of us, and it is the closest to us. And this is the nafs. This is the ego or man's inclination towards evil. And this is basically what the narrations say is the worst of your enemies. Satan tries to trick us. Satan puts scenarios, or Iblis, his name is, he puts situations where a man can fall, but he doesn't force you to sin. The nafs forces you to sin. The dunya, or the world, is extravagant, it attracts you. It is beautiful, but it doesn't force you to disobey Allah. Your nafs, yourself, your ego, your desires, your inclinations make you sin. So tonight we're going to talk about one of the biggest enemies that we have. And this debate, or this discussion or talk, is important for those that want to develop themselves spiritually. If a person doesn't really care about God and reaching God and purification, a lot of times these talks seems like nonsense to them. Say, what do you mean the nafs? Why do I have to stop what I want to do? Why should I stop myself? I want to be free to do whatever I want, whenever I want. A person that wants to reach Allah develops. Maybe this person that I just mentioned, maybe in a very small sense, they'll understand it. But a true abid, a true abd, a true slave understands how difficult and how of a great power the nafs is. Every time they're trying to reach perfection and reach Allah, they get thrown down. A true wayfarer, or a person that is journeying slowly towards Allah, understands the strategies and the dangers of the nafs. In the Quran, in Surah Yusuf, Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam says something very interesting. He talks about this inclination that's inside every human. When they ask him, he says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. As a side note, whenever we hear the Quran, it's very important for us to listen to the Quran, especially when it's being recited. This is the speech of Allah. It's funny sometimes when we think about it, we listen to the speech of man, but we don't want to listen to the speech of Allah. What more important is it than the speech of Allah? Especially in the month of Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وما أبرئ نفسي إن النفس لأمارة بالسوء إلا ما رحم ربي. Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam says, I do not acquit myself. I do not distance myself, as if I even have this inclination. Everybody has this inclination to sin. But of course, he has the rahmat of Allah. It's preserved for him. إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةُ بِالسُّوءِ. Indeed, the soul is a persistent enjoiner of evil. The soul, all the time, over and over and over, is telling us to go to this dangerous path which we might crash and fall. You have maybe heard the story of when the Prophet of Islam went to a battle, and after the battle he told his soldiers that this was the minor struggle, this battle, this physical battle in Islam. That they asked him, well, what is the major struggle? And there he says, fighting or opposing your nafs. This, the Prophet of Islam said, is the major battle in Islam. Imam Ali alayhi salam, in another narration about the nafs, in opposing the nafs, says, Nidhamuddin mukhalafatul hawa. The system of religion is opposing your desires. This is the system of religion. This is what everything in religion has been meant for, is that you oppose your desires, your satanic desires. We also have an opposite inclination and also an opposite desire, which is our Rahmani desires. And we'll talk about that tomorrow night, inshallah. But this evil inclination and to train yourself over and over with salat, with sawm, with fasting and praying that you get used to. You make yourself get accustomed to abiding the rules of Allah. This is the system of faith. And the dangers of a person that keeps studying Islam and practicing without awareness, without knowledge, and without purification. There is this one alim by the name of Ayatollah Ghulam Reza Yazdi. He was during the time of Ayatollah Burujerdi, maybe 50, 60 years ago. He was a mujtahid, a scholar, a jurist that worked on himself a lot. And there's a book that I read about his life. It's very interesting about some of the favors that Allah gave him and some of the deep convictions, the beliefs that he had. One of those I'll share before I say the story about him. He really truly believed in the majlis of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. Once he was sick, they said, he told his companions, or he told the people next to him, he says, take me to the doctor. And they knew what he meant. It wasn't a doctor. He meant, take me to the majlis of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He would go to the majlis, they would have to carry him, put him on an animal, like a donkey, because this was about 50, 60, 70 years ago. And he would go to the majlis, and he would get a little bit of the tea that the people that have cried for Imam Hussein, and he would drink it, and with his purity, he would start feeling better and better, and then he would walk home and go home. This is Ghulam Reza Yazdi, Ayatollah Ghulam Reza Yazdi, the Ayatollah Burujerdi would refer people to him. He said something very interesting to the theological students, but I believe it's also a good advice for everybody. He says that while you're studying in the Hawza, while you're studying in the seminary, just as you become more learned and more learned and more learned, and you perfect your ways of deriving Islamic law, you become a mujtahid, you become an Ayatollah al-Uzma. He says your nafs also gets developed, and your nafs becomes an Ayatollah al-Uzma too. It begins to trick you. Your nafs becomes educated and becomes a mujtahid. That if we don't purify ourselves, or that we're not aware and then we approach Islam for many years, we see at the end that when Israel comes to take my soul, I have gone nothing. Because I wasn't aware of the nafs, and my nafs tricked me, because the nafs is always commanding you towards evil. Your nafs always wants to tell you you're a good person. Don't worry, don't account for yourself. You fasted, you prayed, that's enough. Why you don't need to do that? That is one of the problems with the nafs, is that whenever a person wants to be accountable for themselves, the nafs comes right away, and because it loves itself, it prohibits us from truly seeing who we are. We might be a very bad person, but our nafs tricks us and we think we're very great. And if you see sometimes in today that there are people that say, why do I need to seek forgiveness? I have never done bad to anybody. This is the nafs has tricked them. His nafs has become an Ayatollah Uzma. Right? So my brothers and sisters, while we're in the month of Ramadan, we're purifying ourselves, it's very important to be aware of the dangers that are out there for us. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam has this narration. It's very interesting. Not only is the nafs coming to attack us, and I don't want to be too negative. I'm going to be a little bit negative, then inshallah tomorrow night I'll be more positive. There's a verse that shaitan's going to attack you from different directions. And that basically the verse of Quran, I won't recite it right now, but maybe I will. قال فبما أغويتني لأقعدن لهم صراطك المستقيم. Because Satan says, because you've put me in error, I'm going to sit. See the Sirat al-Mustaqim, the right path? Satan is going to sit there and wait for us, wait for humans. And then I will come to the humans. I'll come to them, before them, behind them, to the right side, to the left side. You will not find most of them grateful. وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. And I will show to you, Allah, that mankind is not grateful. I'm going to sit in the Sirat al-Mustaqim and wait there. You've heard this verse maybe, but this is the explanation that is interesting. Imam Baqir alayhi salam, because this is Abu Ja'far. Abu Ja'far alayhi salam, in this narration from Al-Kafi, says, Ya Zurara, he tells Zurara, his companion, do you know who Satan is talking about, who I'm going to trick, who I'm going to fool? Innama samada lak. He's going to oppose you, Zurara. He's going to attack you. Wala ashabik, and your companions and the followers of the Ahlul Bayt. Shaitan is going to attack them. Why is Shaitan going to attack the followers of the Ahlul Bayt? It's very logical. What happens if the followers of the Ahlul Bayt purify themselves, become a good human being, and they get ready to be a companion of the 12th Imam, and the 12th Imam reappears? What happens to Satan? Satan will be doomed. So Satan is especially hunting the enemies of those of himself. And he's hunting and he's trying to stop the followers of the Ahlul Bayt from reaching and unifying and becoming powerful. فَأَمَّا الْآخَرُونَ فَقَدْ فَرَغَ مِنْهُمْ. And the rest of the people, I don't bother them. Satan does not bother them in this narration in Al-Kafi. It's like that story that they say that a person saw Satan and he had different chains, and he had a very thick and big chain, a medium chain, a small chain, and he asked him, what are you doing? He said, see this huge chain, this is for Shaykh. I believe this story is for Shaykh Murtada Ansari. I'm going to get him with this chain. And he broke it. I couldn't get him. And then he asked Shaitan, they say, he said, what about me? What chain do you use for me? He says, I don't need a chain. You come to me yourself. So Shaitan doesn't need, because the nafs itself goes towards, so some people, he doesn't need to trick. But what he does need to do is in the story in the Quran, when Prophet Musa alayhi salam sees two people fighting. Two people are fighting, and Prophet Musa alayhi salam, Moses comes to stop the fight or help, and he hits one person and he dies. And he says, this is amal al-shaytan, this is an act of Satan. Ma'mun asked Imam Rida alayhi salam, how is this an act of Satan? And Imam Rida alayhi salam says basically that because Satan wanted Moses to be caught and didn't want him to get powerful and rebel against the Pharaoh, he brought this fight about so that Moses can be caught. So this is what Satan does for the mu'mineen against the infallibles. And I mentioned this, he tricks Ibn Muljam to fight and kill Imam Ali alayhi salam. He tricks people to join Yazid's army. This is what he does. His main enemy are the infallibles. His main enemy is Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Once there's this student of theology, they say, he went to a teacher, and it was a correct teacher. Sometimes there's these teachers that will, instead of guiding us, they could misguide us. My teacher always said, be very careful. It could be like an ocean. There's different people. But he found a good teacher, and this teacher began to give him some instructions to make this student better and purify him. He told his teacher that when I started this class, when I started these instructions, and this isn't very dangerous. I mean, not for us. There's a lot of people in this time in many different societies that claim that they know the ways of irfan and mysticism and be my student, I'll show you. We should be very careful of people that have to say such things. But anyways, this person had a good teacher. And he says that when I started this class, before when I went to get bread, the opposite gender didn't really affect me. They would go and buy bread too, and I wouldn't look at them and get my bread and go. But now I started this class yesterday. It was so difficult for me. There was somebody there, and I kept wanting to look at her. I was attracted. How come it's like this? Your class is the opposite. And now that I started, and the teacher said, it's true. When you begin this path of self-purification, when you begin this path, Satan comes at you. Satan comes for you to trick you because he knows that you're going to become purified. So you have to be very careful that when you talk about the nafs and purifying the nafs and you want to put a program for yourself, a spiritual program, shaitan is going to be at one side and also your own nafs. There's this great arif by the name of Ayatollah Zarabadi Qazvini. Ayatollah Zarabadi, he had very different, he was a wayfarer and he reached different, very high levels of spiritual growth in such a way that he could see things. There are people in this day and age, in this time, that they can have, Allah gives them these karamats and blessings. So he would see different things, but when he saw a person walk in the street, Ayatollah Zarabadi, this person came to him and said that, do you want to reach the very high levels of iman? Do you want to reach the very high levels of power or mysticism? And he said, stop doing your wajibat. Stop performing the halal and stop doing the wajib and your obligations. And then because he was a mujtahid, he says, well, I have sound proof. This is real. This is from the Quran. This is from the Ahlul Bayt. I'm sure this is true. Why should I stop the wajibat? Then this person said, okay, if you don't, I'm going to take everything away from you. And the guy said, okay, do it. Take everything you want from me. Then they heard this scream in this story. This is in one of the books. It said, this was Satan. And Satan had given him these powers to see things, to do miraculous things, but it was from him, to trick him and trick him and trick him all the way so that finally, to that day, he could come and tell him, don't obey God anymore. If you want to reach real irfan, you don't even need to pray anymore. That's for the beginning stage. So these are, and then Ayatollah Zarabadi, he lost everything. He lost all his gifts that, not that God gave, that Satan gave and God allowed. But he began from the beginning in a pure, he was pure, but in a way of just mustahabat and recommended actions. He did it over and over and over. And then he says, the position I had then compared to what I had before was much, my new position was much, much greater. So Satan, the nafs, these are dangers for us. And unfortunately, many times we can't really, we need the help of Allah. And that is what I want to get to tonight, is that what are the steps? Okay, we say nafs is bad. We say ghaybat, talking behind somebody is bad. We say that this action is bad, but we can't stop. What can we do to fight against our nafs? Fight against our evil inclinations? The first thing that we can do is that what we must do is just how there's these different forces that are going to attack us. We have to seek refuge in Allah. So step number one is sincerely asking Allah to help us and sincerely wanting to be purified. There's this munajat that I recommend for you brothers and sisters to read. It's called Munajatul Shakeen. If you look at, it's in the 70th dua in Sahifa Sajjadiyah, Munajatul Shakeen. It's a paragraph. I've heard it in a speech and then I read it myself, and it introduces to you the nafs in a way that you might have not have saw how dangerous the nafs is. And I'm going to read for you a little bit of Munajat al-Shakeen, Sermon 70, Dua 70. Imam Sajjad, which is Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, with the maqam and status that he has, and the du'as that he had, and the prayers that he has. Listen how he talks about the nafs, the jewel of the worshippers. He says this, Ilahi ilayka ashku nafsan bisu'i ammara. My God, I complain of a soul commanding evil. Complaining here means basically I seek refuge in you. Allah help me. I have a nafs, I have a soul that's commanding evil, it's pulling me towards evil. وَإِلَى الْخَطِيئَةِ مُبَارَدَةً. A nafs that does this, And when you reflect upon yourselves, do you see, is this inside us or not? Imam Sajjad alayhi salam says, is rushing to offenses, rushing to make mistakes. It's rushing. وَبِمُعَاصِيكَ مُولَعَ. And that it's eager, has a wala'. Wala' is somebody that's eager, has this desire, this eagerness to disobey you. This nafs that's rushing to make mistakes. This nafs that's rushing, that's eager to disobey Allah. Inside it, this nafs doesn't want to listen to Allah. Doesn't want to do salat when you tell it to do salat. وَبِالسَّخَطِكَ مُتَعَرِّضَةً وَلِلسَّخَطِكَ مُتَعَرِّضَةً. And that it leads man, it exposes itself to your anger. This nafs, it makes itself, it carries you in a way that it puts you where Allah's anger will happen. نَسْلُكُ بِي مَسَالِكَ الْمَهَالِكِ. It takes you on the roads of disaster, the roads of destruction, this nafs. So Imam Sajjad is saying, if you don't pay attention to this nafs, if you don't learn how to brake and make your brakes strong, then you will be led to the road of disaster and you will fall. وَتَجْعَلُنِي عِنْدَكَ أَهْوَنُ حَالِكَ. And it will make me of the easiest of perishers. It will make me perish. Very easy of this nafs. That's how dangerous it is. And then he talks about Satan and Shaitan. So you see these attributes of the nafs, it's going to lead us to a path that we could fall and destroy ourselves. It's rushing to disobey Allah. It's also eager. It's eager to disobey. It's rushing for offenses, to oppose God. They say there's a story in one of the poems, and it's a very famous story, that a person once went to the mountains and there was this snake or serpent, and inside this there was a frozen serpent, let's say, a dragon or a serpent, and he brings it to the village because it was something amazing and everybody comes. He takes it from the coldness where it's frozen and he brings it to the village where it's warm and everybody gathers around. There he thought that the snake was dead and that people can come and see what a dragon or what a serpent I got. Slowly and slowly it begins to heat up and the serpent or the dragon begins to awaken. It awakens and kills this person, kills that person. There the poet says that basically this nafs isn't killed, isn't dead. It's never killed, it's never dead. And this nafs, basically says nafs is like a dragon, nafs is like the snake. It never dies. It can become frozen, it can be controlled, but it won't die. In a circumstance when you're not watching it and you don't want it to, your anger to come out, suddenly it'll awake again. It'll devour somebody. So this is the serpent and the snake inside all of us. That if we don't learn how to control it, learn how to deal with it, it could devour us and our friends. The second thing to do about the nafs, and when I give this speech, I'm not saying that I controlled my nafs. From in this room, probably the person that has disobeyed Allah or has fallen to his nafs the most is probably me. So it's not me that has gone against his own nafs. The second thing is to understand the nafs. To understand that it's an enemy of us, how dangerous it is. The third thing we can do if we see our inclinations and our desires are building up and it's going to damage us, it's going to destroy us, it's a very good advice. It's like putting water on fire. It's remembering death. When you remember death, your nafs just goes down. All those things that you wanted to do, all those inclinations, those things that drive you and you couldn't control yourself, if you just say, tomorrow I'm going to die, all those things that you're thinking of doing, you're not going to worry about it anymore. You're going to die. It's going to be gone. So thinking about death and thinking about three things in this narration, thinking about When three things happens in this narration, a man, if it didn't happen to mankind, he would always be arrogant. These three things break man. And it's very interesting, in these three scenarios, the du'as of a person is also mustajab and answered. These three things. One is al-marad. When a person is sick, he gets broken. His nafs gets broken. He's not arrogant anymore. He's not conceited anymore as much. He doesn't have those aspirations, those inclinations. Two, and also his dua is mustajab. Why? Because he is broken. Now he is an abd. Now he is humble towards Allah, and Allah will answer his prayers. Now he's in line again with what Allah wanted for him to be an abd. The second is faqr, poverty. Even though nobody does dua for these things, we don't do dua for these things, but this is what poverty does. Somebody, imagine if they had a very rich and lavish lifestyle and suddenly they hit poverty. They become humble. They become humble and their nafs just breaks, their ego breaks, and they see themselves as nothing, and they call this dhull al-ubudiyat. They become completely humble and submissive. The third is wal maut, death. Imagine, and I said, if Israel is coming to us, then we would be humble. Imagine if I say we're going to die now, in 2 months. The entire world, with all its attractions, would be meaningless for us. The fourth thing, so the first was to ask Allah sincerely, and like Munajat al-Shakeen, sincerely ask Allah for help. Because without His help, we will be in this danger of Satan and the danger of the nafs. Second, we said, is this awareness. Many of us aren't aware that there is such a danger inside us. There is this serpent inside us. Guard it. Be careful of it. And sometimes, even in some issues, you can practice to see how much can you control your inclinations, even with something that's not halal, that's not haram. See, I want to eat this right now. Practice. Say, okay, I'm going to eat this instead. And when I talk about the nafs also, because this is, sometimes I've seen people take this to the extreme. They keep fighting their nafs so much, they fight their nafs so much, that they, on the other hand, completely rebel. When you talk about fighting the nafs and jihad al-nafs, it's a little bit at a time. You have to also allow your nafs freedom too. It's not all about punishing it and whipping it and controlling yourself, and then suddenly you leave Islam altogether because it's unbearable. That's what might happen at the beginning. Islam is a very easy religion. For example, about charity, it says, give charity a little bit, but the more you give it every day. A little bit of charity, right? It talks about salat. Do this 5 minutes. It's an easy religion. It's a religion of ease. But when you talk about the nafs to some people take it to the extreme. I've seen a person that they said that they wanted to wear a shirt. They said, I want to wear this color, I like this shirt, and they're going to fight against their nafs, they're going to wear this color now. Then they wanted to go this way, I'm going to fight with myself, I'm going to go this way. They completely fought with their nafs so much that they just quit. They quit everything. So it's like a zigzag approach. Fight a little bit if you need to, especially when it comes to halal and haram, that is the most important. But observe your nafs and be accountable for your nafs. And the third, we said, remembering death. If you remember death, and I'm speaking to myself especially tonight, remembering death, all of those inclinations, evil inclinations will be gone. And the fourth way, which is a very nice way, is if you organize yourself, if you have a schedule or a program for yourself, your nafs won't come in as much. Imam Ali alayhi salam, in one of the hadith after he was hit on the head, he told his sons to come. He gave advice to his family members. He told them about taqwa. He says, I tell you about bitaqwa Allah, I give you wasiyat about taqwa wa nadhmi amrikum. Taqwa and organizing your affairs. What is the relation between not sinning and organizing our affairs? See, religion and following the order of Allah and being disciplined itself, a person becomes organized. When a person practices not eating from this time to this time, they become organized, they have a schedule for themselves. The nafs is about not being disciplined and not being organized. The more you have a program for yourself, a schedule for yourself, for example, you tell yourself, every week I'm going to come to the center, right? Even if my nafs, because if you allow the nafs alone, it's going to be a couch potato, it's going to be basically a drug addict. If you completely allow it, it's going to do whatever it wants. And it's very difficult taking away the habits of the nafs and Satan. It's like, for example, somebody that for 40 years has been used to taking, say, drugs, and you want to take away the evilness inside. So it's a very long process. But if you have a program and if you have a schedule for yourselves, you will see that the nafs and our desires, it doesn't have room to come in anymore. You block it. And you become one of them. You become organized. And that is the beauty of Islam. Islam is about organizing yourself with all of the universe. And a musalli, a person that prays, salat, which is one of the greatest commands and first commands of us, is a command which is related to time. Fajr, dhuhr, asr, maghrib. It's with time. So taqwa comes with scheduling and programming. And in our narrations, it says, don't do a lot of ibadat or worships or great acts at one time. Spread it out. An act that's small and little, but it's persistent. It's much better than a huge act of worship and then you let it go. So having a spiritual program for ourselves, coming to the center, say, once a week, doing this dua once a day. You add something small, but you do it. In the narration that says if you have a program for yourself, if you want it to have an effect, do it for 1 year. If you do that act for 1 year, then you'll see the answer, even if it's small. So the fourth is one of the best ways to control our nafs ourselves, is to have a schedule and program and have nadm, because the nafs is about not being disciplined and breaking and wasting time and doing whatever it wants right then. Once you have a schedule, you're taming your nafs. Please give a salawat. If we can dim the lights, we'll remember Imam Ali alayhi salam, whose today was his martyrdom. The person that I said, his greatness, he is the display of Allah's greatness. The person that, as great as he was also oppressed. The great Imam Ali, that as great as he was, as oppressed he was kind. He was very kind. When you look when Ibn Muljam strikes Imam Ali on the head, and they capture Ibn Muljam, there he says something that shocks everybody that when they read it. Imam Ali, when they bring him food, he says, "At'imu min ta'ami," give him of my food. That person that has killed Imam Ali, that person that has hit him in the head as a coward with a poisonous sword, Imam Ali tells him, they bring him food, give him of my food. Wasqu min sharabi, from my drink. You want to bring milk for me? Give it to Ibn Muljam. Who in history do you know that has done such a thing? Then he says, "Urfuq ya waladi bi asirik," be kind to him. Warhamhu, have mercy to him. He talks about, don't you see in his eyes, in his heart, this captive is afraid? Have mercy on him. This is the kindness of Amir al-Mu'minin. As great as he is also kind. And there he says, if I die, فَإِنْ أَنَا مِتْ فَاقْتَصْ مِنْهُ وَتَضْرِبَهُ ضَرْبَةً وَاحِدًا. Hit him once. If you decide to get vengeance, hit him once. But if I'm going to be alive, فَأَنَا أَوْلَى بِالْعَفْوِ, I have the authority more to forgive him. I'm afraid that if Amir al-Mu'mineen was alive and if he didn't die, he would have forgiven Ibn Muljam. وأنا أعلم بما أفعل به فإن عفوت فنحن أهل بيت لا نزداد على المذنب إلينا إلا عفوا وكرما. And we, the Ahl al-Bayt, for a sinner, we present to them forgiveness and for them karam. But when Imam Ali alayhi salam said this, and Imam Hassan alayhi salam got the vengeance, and because of the political situation, he had to kill Ibn Muljam. If he didn't, Muawiyah and the enemies that they had that time, they would become more arrogant. So they had to kill Ibn Muljam and they executed him, but they hit him once. But how come this is the life of the Ahlul Bayt? They hit this person and they kill him with mercy. But look at the way in Karbala, how they attack Imam Hussein and how they go after the children of Imam Hussein. Didn't they hear the narration of the Prophet that says, do never cut somebody to pieces? Haven't they heard that narration in Karbala, when they got Ali Akbar and they hit him in such a way and they cut him into pieces in front of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, that he tells the Bani Hashim, he tells them, Bani Hashim, come and get Ali Akbar, because they say that he was in pieces. One person could not take him anymore. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.